As a scientist, this is the most interesting plant that we know nothing about.
100%. I wanted to go through some controversial topics in the cultivation community. Flushing, no flushing. Why am I finding microseeds in my medical flower?
Sex expression in cannabis is controlled by 200 genes. I often joke, some cushes you can look at the wrong way and get male anthers next week.
Smokability. How does an EU-GMP or manufacturer test smokability? What's your philosophy on curing, and why is curing important for a cultivation team? What is it that you look for in a candidate and in a team?
These are not quick myth busters.
I love it. I love it though. I think you're giving the scientific content and the practical content.
I have a PhD from the University of Toronto. I worked with the absolute genius botanist, Organogram, where I used to be the director of cultivation. I'm all about mimicking natural processes, even in controlled environments.
What are you excited about?
Producing tons and tons of medical flower to help people across the world with their problems. That's cool.
Love this. Absolutely love this.
The Cannabis Conversation, powered by Lumino. Exploring the legal cannabis industry and the people shaping it. Today's guest is Dr. Nigel Gale, Director of Grow and Production at Nova Soma, an EU-GMP certified cannabis facility operating under SOMAÍ. Now, on to the show.
Nigel, you've moved around a lot in this industry, been at different companies, joined new companies, new teams. I was really excited to have the opportunity to be shown around your facility a couple of weeks ago. One thing that I thought was really interesting is just how you'd only been there for, 6-7 months, really operationally.
Yeah.
And just seeing how happy everyone seemed in the grow, how happy the plants seemed. Very interesting parallels that you drew between plants and humans and management. The KPIs going absolutely through the roof on every metric. What do you look at when you move into a new company? What is do you have a bit of a checklist or a process that you go through when you first arrive? And what does that look like?
Thank you. And your question of, what do I look for when I go to a place is I need to understand the place first. And so get total understanding of the system. It's an ecosystem. We exist in the ecosystem. It's plants, environment, and people interacting together. And when you enter in a leadership role, you're the leader of this group of people. And, the biggest myth in the industry too is companies want to throw money at problems. So you need more product or more yield, buy more lights, buy more infrastructure, buy more people. What I'm looking for when I join a company is, what are the limitations here right now? What in this framework is so greatly limiting that you don't need to spend money if you just solve this challenge? And often it's pretty immediate what that is. With enough experience, you kind of know immediately. And so the first thing is getting really great knowledge of the system, understanding those blocks, and then the impact you mentioned that I've had is literally just unraveling that block.
I mean, it was insane. I can't remember the numbers exactly, but it was something along the lines of tripling yield, and you didn't spend a single penny on new equipment or anything. So you just took what they had and made the tweaks to the team and the process, if my understanding is correct, and tripled yields.
Well, thanks for already boosting the yield. Not triple, but double.
Double.
But I mean, double is also good.
That is insane. It's insane. Without a single extra cost.
Yeah. So I mean, and this is a good selling feature for me, as if you're my recruiter. Then I say often in interviews, I can double yields through this unraveling of limitations approach, and without spending a single dollar. And it's what you saw when you came to the facility. There's KPIs and data everywhere. There's a whiteboard mind map. So when you're on the production floor, every single person from leadership to operator to floor sweeper knows what's happening in the facility. This room, this thing is happening. These people are here. This is what's expected. Basically, you can be a robot just cruising through the facility, and the place is legible. Information is accessible. People know what the goals are. And this happens all the time. I can be in a, senior leadership meeting. I'm hearing about the revenue target for the year. I walk onto the production floor. I see the yield graphs and potency to get product that will hit that revenue target. And people in the grow rooms know exactly this new cultivar is going to help us launch into the UK. And it's 30% THC and everyone is on board. There's complete congruence throughout the organization.
So it's not just cultivation targets, it's actually company targets that are boiled down into the cultivation itself, and every single operator understands where it's going.
Yes, there's this sort of critical mass of congruence, and I think my approach is not forgetting too about the people. A lot of organizations, especially from the North American perspective, they scale really large, and you might have really great operation managers. You might have excellent scientific teams. You might have a great business strategy, but almost always like real actual leadership is lacking. And I think leadership is being present in everywhere, in everything that you do. Every meeting, every time you're in a grow room, you're asking a question, how's your sister doing? That's real leadership. And when things fail, leadership is going to the boss's office and saying, oh, we just got this result. It's not good. and often the response is, okay. And so that's leadership. And also encouraging leaders to be leaders is part of my recipe. So one person can't do everything. You have to build the system to self-sustain. And I had a great example of leadership the other day where I was encouraging my leaders to be leaders. We needed some extra cleaning efforts to occur in our change rooms, and one of my leaders volunteered to clean the change rooms. He was cleaning the change rooms, and staff were coming in, and they started cleaning the change rooms while he was cleaning the change rooms. He didn't say anything, and he was beaming to me, telling me this at our we have daily whiteboard meetings with leadership, and he's telling me this. And I just clapped and said,
just lead by example.
Yeah, that's leadership.
That's amazing. Have you had situations where you come in, you're the new boss, and things don't go smoothly? Is there a pattern that you see there, and like what is usually the main challenge coming in?
If you don't make your approach smooth, then it's always going to get resistance. And even with the best approach, you'll find resistance. And part of doing your reconnaissance before joining an organization is asking yourself, can I actually transition to make an impact here? Is the culture that's already here, do I know what that is? So understanding the system comes before you even walk through the door. And then if it's not working with that team, maybe you have to make key changes on the team. It's a business. The business has hired you to make an impact. As long as yourself is checked, I'm here to make an impact, so you're on board or you're not.
Like the football team,
yes, exactly.
Or sports team analogy.
You have your own approach and style, and the players are definitely not used to that. And maybe you have to get rid of the previous captain or something, and they hate you, and so on and so forth. But you're their leader. You understand them. You give them confidence and the skills, and then you start winning games. And then everything starts changing. And so you have to earn that trust, earn their confidence, and be the messenger from top of the org all the way down. You're the linchpin. Yeah,
makes so much sense. What are the things you look for to be like, oh, thank God that is done right? Like, is there any sort of specific pillars where you're like, this is some of the most important stuff to get right?
The infrastructure has to be good enough. There's no like fundamental HVAC, problems, or the lighting is already sufficient. The genetics that are there are already selling in various markets. So my football management approach, I can work with this facility. I can work with the kit man. We can win some games with just this change in style, basically.
One thing that I find fascinating about you as a candidate in this industry, and it's really hard to actually find, is you're a PhD. Maybe you can speak to that for a second, like what you actually studied and what was your plan? Because I feel a lot of people with very strong scientific backgrounds don't usually find their way into the commercial side that quickly. It does obviously happen, but you've got that really strong scientific background, breeding and R&D. and you've translated that into commercial cultivation. So you understand the science and how to commercially make that viable.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, it's not just the cultivation, it's the post-harvest and probably more than that even. Can you speak to that briefly? Then I'll ask some questions around genetics.
For sure. And, if I get off track, just stop me, because there's quite a lot to say. So, as you said, I have a PhD from the University of Toronto, which it sounds crazy to say, but I was very lucky. I worked with the absolute genius botanist, and went all over the world with him to study how plants interact with their environment. And you can obviously see the parallels into what I do now in the cannabis industry. And, these investigations were at scales from cellular to leaf to plant to ecosystem. So ecosystem philosophy is literally my scientific training with what I consider the best botanist of our generation. At the same time as finishing the PhD, I had a family friend who owned an aquaponics company in Canada. And so basically serendipity, I'd be over, my friend's place, and his father would be talking about the company and the challenges in the literal aquaponics ecosystem. And I would know, like, we just do this and do that, and that should solve the limitation. And so he's like, you gotta come work for me. And I was really resistant, because back in 2017, so a decade now, basically, cannabis was still kind of taboo. Like, it was still sort of not cool. It wasn't cool yet. It wasn't mainstream. And from a pure academic, scientific standpoint, if something has taboo on it, you're kind of resistant. But when it legalized, as a scientist, this is the most interesting plant that we know nothing about.
100%. I was also like, if I was in the sciences, there's no other field I'd go into right now. Or back then in 2017, that's what it felt like. It's the frontier of...
Exactly. And so the career choices were, I can be a forester, I can work in traditional agriculture, and I can pursue this, professor research pathway. But then the family friend literally like knocking on the door, like, come on. And suddenly there's this great frontier. It was easy to go into the industry. And I've never lost any of the things that I really loved about being a scientist in academia. I still publish papers. I still do research, often at the companies that I work for. I'm still leading teams. In fact, I think the scientific impact every day is way more than I ever could have had in a purely academic field. I think.
Wow.
Yeah, at each organization, some of them I work for have hundreds of staff, and I'm teaching them things. And I never lose sight of producing tons and tons of medical flower to help people across the world with their problems. As a scientist, like, as a human, that's cool.
That's cool. That's definitely cool.
And I should say too, because it's almost unbelievable telling these stories, but I have a twin brother. And he's also a scientist. And we worked for the same family friend, the first company. And so I had a joint botany and cultivation team, and he was doing the extraction and derivative. So this hybrid of operations and science together. And we did the whole pizza lunch on Friday with a lab meeting, and no work gets done after lunch. But ideas are coming in these meetings, and we'd put them into practice. And we've both gone our separate ways, and have had great careers since. But that was the start.
I had to double check when I first saw his face pop up on LinkedIn. I was like, wait, what? So you twin?
And what about you? How did you get into this space? What's your...
My story, how I got in. I was just interested from a recreational perspective very early on, just like a teenager. I grew up in Spain, where growing cannabis was very normal. Since I can remember, people were allowed to grow 3 plants at home. So it's pretty... And Ibiza has a very strong hippie culture. So a lot of my friends whose parents were just straight up hippies. So I would go to their houses and just be fascinated by it was like a family activity to grow cannabis, basically. So it's my first real contact with cultivating any sort of plant. I then got actually expelled for smoking cannabis when I was quite young. Ended up in boarding school.
Can I laugh?
No, of course you can laugh.
You're
laughing.
laughing.
I bought hash I bought hash, got caught, and there's only one English school in Ibiza. So my parents were like, "Oh, that's boarding school for you now." And I was like, "Oh no." So I ended up in boarding school, but that's where I met Tom, my business partner and CEO now of Lumino. So really went full circle from getting kicked out of school to starting Europe's first recruitment agency for the cannabis market.
Well, that's a comeback story to the school, right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
It was really funny actually going to visit all of our teachers, me and Tom, after having set this up. And they were like chasing us, drug testing us the whole time. And now we're here as like cannabis professionals.
Amazing.
Like,
Congrats.
So it was pretty cool to see. But no, for me, the journey was, just a real recreational interest. I could see that things were changing. And when I finished high school, I had to choose what university I'd go to. And I had enough of the UK after 7 years of being there. So I decided to go to Amsterdam to try and find a way into the cannabis industry. I studied international business and languages, and pretty much every single project, anything that where I could choose the topic, cannabis was the thing that I was researching, mainly from a commercial perspective. That led to my first internship being at Europe's first medical cannabis clinic in Barcelona, which turned into a job, which then spiraled into consulting work for a couple of different companies, where it was really a time where anybody that was interested in cannabis and had some sort of like education and professional attitude was very welcome to join the cannabis industry. I did everything from helping companies with licensing procedures to finding real estate for retail, hospitals, setting up clinics. Then I started brokering cannabis, so mainly CBD and other tertiary cannabinoids that weren't high THC varieties, that then went all the way to like CBD flower. And then kind of that network, and Tom, my business partner and friend at the time, he called me because I was writing business plans for companies at the time that were handing in application procedures in the US mainly. And he called me and he's like, I want to get into this market. I was like, just go to any conference. The CEO is at the stand. You can sell yourself. You'll get a job. He came back with 4 job offers. So the next, and then we kind of just put our heads together and just realized it was actually Tom's idea. He was like, man, nobody's thinking about hiring properly. Like everyone's just throwing any job at us. So we're not the right guys for this. So something's not right here. So a lot of our consulting work actually ended up being like, okay, this is your problem. Well, speak to this guy. This is your problem. She can solve that problem. Right. And Tom was like, how about a recruitment function? First, the idea was a job board, and then that kind of didn't solve the problem for people. So we just built a HR consultancy and recruitment agency, executive search for this market, and haven't really looked back since. That was back in 2018.
Well, you guys are the guys in Europe, so congrats. And
thank you so much.
And I think for anyone listening, just trust your path. If you find yourself expelled, have faith. It'll work out.
My brother then after I got expelled, he also went to boarding school with me. I'm also a twin, by the way. Oh. But we're non-identical. You guys are identical, right?
Yeah. Cool.
So, and he got expelled from boarding school for weed. And he's also,
oh no,
I think this is now his 10th year in the cannabis market as well. Like for me, I joined in 2015. I joined the market. So it's been over a decade now for me. So I follow your path. I completely agree with that. Completely agree.
You need to ask me about genetics.
I was about to say genetics. At the beginning, everyone was like, oh, how do I get these state-of-the-art facilities up and running? And I felt like finding the right genetics for the market was something that was forgotten for a long time. Now it's boiled down to the pain has gotten so big that everyone is now looking at, okay, what genetics do I bring in? One thing that I see so often is I go to my candidates that I've placed in director of cultivation seats, and they're showing me very proudly all of the varieties that they've cultivated. And some of the favorite ones sometimes are like, yeah, this is my favorite one as well, but we're going to drop it. We can't grow it next round. It really sucks, but it just doesn't make sense for us.
Don't get attached.
Don't get attached. So, and sometimes it's heartbreaking. I'm like, oh no, this is why would this not be commercial? So, what's your selection process? What are the most important things you look for? What are the big red flags to avoid?
Yeah, we could have a whole episode on this. The first place I really like to start is asking the question, will this cultivar, will this genetic, will the flower from it work in the target market? Is there going to be demand? You can have the best facility, you can spend all the money, have the best team, grow it batch after batch. It's it's the same. It's performing well. It looks great, but if it doesn't sell, it's a failure. And so the very first place to start is, I'm selling product in this market. What will work? And most mature markets like the same things. And you can use data from what works in one existing market and have some confidence that it's going to do well in another. And it's no coincidence that Canadian flower is doing well in the UK and Germany.
100%.
The flowers that did well in Canada are literally those same flowers being shipped here. And above all, they're potent. So 25% is even kind of low now. Going up to 30 is the standard. Obviously, there's kind of niche connoisseur sorts of markets that don't really care that much, but overwhelmingly you need to have high potency. You've got the Canadian market, you've got the US market. Australia is sort of old now too, or older. Still sort of, it's growing, but it's been around for a while. So that's the place to start. And then finally, you can start growing it in your system. Every system is different. So you could be growing in a greenhouse that has certain challenges, highly controlled indoor environment. HPS is not the same as LED. Maybe one place is using tissue culture and another place is using a mother propagation program. So you have to say, this cultivar that I know is going to sell, will it work in my particular system? And then you don't make the fatal error of rushing it into production. I'm a scientist, and do the scientific thing and do a trial in your system to see if it will perform. Like I said, those KPIs of it's potent, it has organoleptic appeal is a big one now. And especially in EU-GMP compliant facilities, there really can't be any problems. So this thing has to perform extremely well. No, mature seeds, even the flower structure, when you're trimming now, the EU Pharmaceuticopoeia has certain leaf length sizes that aren't allowed on the final flower. So even characteristics like this cultivar is less leafy, requires less trimming work, those sorts of things. So I think if I believe in a cultivar, not just because, I'm attached to it, but all the data suggests that this will do well in a market, and it sort of works in the system. So I'm using the data from the small scale trials, and let's say it doesn't root that well. I've got 95% rooting on all my other stuff, but this one I'm struggling. Maybe it's 70%. Most places are fixed in their procedures. I've got this SOP. It says to use this rooting compound in this way. It doesn't work. Cancel the whole program. And I'll be like, no. We're scientists now. We can figure this out. Use a different rooting compound at a different strength. Let the block dry out a little bit more, and suddenly the limitation that would have stopped this commercial launch is gone. And so there's some real difficult cultivars out there to grow. Even a challenge of something is really great but doesn't yield that well, and the company is extremely bent on a yield target. You can still use science to get around that, increase the density that you plant in the grow room, elongate a veg time to have a bigger plant that goes into flower. You can kind of get around it that way, but I'd always make the case to leadership that the flower needs to sell. If we produce a little bit less of it, but it's selling, that's a good problem.
Absolutely. This thing of understanding your customer and then reverse engineering from there makes a hellload of sense.
And it's a product market fit. Yeah. And just because it's cannabis doesn't mean we have to forgo like normal business doctrine of company needs to have a product that customers want. In this case, it's a medical patient. It's still a customer, and that product has to fit the market for that customer.
Absolutely. What are the main two aspects really just THC percentage and yield that are usually the killers? Even like if variety is beautiful, bud structure, full of trichomes, it looks pretty, like has the bag appeal, it has got the nose, What aspects would say, okay, I can't cultivate this from to a commercial perspective? What are the main things?
It's a she that really wants to be a he is often the problem when you're a cannabis plant. And being a hermaphrodite is this is a very long conversation, but sex expression in cannabis is controlled by 200 genes, and we have little understanding of those interactions, and environmental stresses can trigger any one of those 200 or clusters of them. And I often joke that some cushions you can look at the wrong way, and you'll get male anthers next week. and anyone who's watching will be laughing along because they know that that's true. And so this is where this scientific component comes into: can I get around this problem, or is this problem so inherent in this cultivar that we can't accept it as a business?
Yeah, and that's why running a trial, as you said, is so important, right? Because it can perform amazing in all these different environments, and then you bring it into also just an indoor environment, but here in Portugal, and suddenly something is wrong.
Yeah, exactly. And other things that basically you're protecting your ecosystem too. So even in highly controlled indoor environments that have sterilization and environmental controls like you wouldn't believe, it's still an ecosystem with spores of stuff flying around and bacteria all the time. And some cultivars just love powdery mildew, or I should say powdery mildew loves them. You have a new cultivar that you've screened, it's been tested even, and everything's fine, but then suddenly powdery mildew is on this batch and your existing lineup is at risk. You cannot tolerate pockets of something like powdery mildew. So those would be other factors that would automatically say, like, hey, I don't care if this Girl Scout cookies is amazing. Powdery mildew loves Girl Scout cookies, and let's not grow that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Any genetics you can talk about that are exciting you currently at Nova Soma?
Yeah. We've got 2 new launches coming up that have gone through those small scale trials in our system, and we've repeated the results. We've got Ridgeline Lantz, which is a cookies cultivar not currently available in the UK or Germany, so it doesn't exist in these markets yet. And so that's another big part of picking and
it's got a proven track record in North America.
Exactly. So you just nailed it. So I spent hours at work looking at Reddit, subreddits from North America, people that are getting these products there, and I'm doing the diligence. And obviously we work with cookies, so we know where the things are coming from that we get, and did a trial with a bunch of different cultivars all at the same time, collected all the data, and the 2 clear winners were Ridgeline Lantz and that Badu, and that Badu also isn't available anywhere in the UK or Germany, and so they're going to be pushing 30% THC. And something that I haven't mentioned yet about picking genetics is, once you've checked all the boxes, this is new in this market, it hits the potency terpene profile. So you don't want 2 of the same thing. If that Badu and Ridgeline Lantz are very similar in how they look, in their terpene profile especially, then what's the difference between them? So these 2 are extremely different in their palate. And that Badu is this creamy, citrusy palate, and Ridgeline Lantz is this like linalool, dank, gas, skunk, but candy, all at the same time. And even thinking about it, my mouth is doing different things with those flavor profiles. So yeah, I'm extremely excited to launch those, and it's not just me. I represent Nova Soma. Everyone's excited in the facility, which tells you it's real. Everyone is buzzing.
When can patients get it?
We have our first large commercial batches growing now, so in a couple months it should be available.
Excited.
Yeah, I think summertime. Yeah.
Awesome. Nigel, I wanted to go through some controversial topics in the cultivation community, or for growers, or we could call them myths. I would like to hear your opinion on those things. It doesn't really matter what we start with, but let's go with flushing, no flushing. Maybe a 1-second explanation of what I'm asking, even like what flushing was.
Sure. Well, yeah, you're trying to get me canceled here, and so it's gonna be a hot one. As a biologist, I must say that this flushing is a natural thing for an annual cannabis plant that would be growing in a temperate environment. So in the fall, you have lots of rain. That rain is diluting whatever nutrients are available. The plant in the fall is basically on its death throes. Not much is happening as far as requiring a huge amount of nutrients. So this is a normal thing. I'm all about mimicking natural processes, even in controlled environments. So check mark right away for flushing makes sense from a natural point of view. And flushing, sorry, I didn't open with what flushing is basically near the end of the life cycle. As you approach harvest, you're applying basically water without any mineral nutrients in it. And people can do pure flushes with absolutely nothing, like no EC, and you can do taper flushes from what your normal EC levels would be, half, a quarter. Sometimes you can flush aggressively for 2 weeks or 1 week prior to harvest or a few days. So my take on it is this is natural. The plant doesn't need your full fertilizer EC level right at its end of its life. So you're wasting nutrients, and that's not good for the budget, but it also increases the risk of actually too much salt stress right at the end. The root zone is full of salts, and so flushing, even with absolutely no fertigation EC, like minerals dissolved, is still fertilizer because it's taking salt from your root zone and diluting it and distributing it. So yeah, I'm a fan of flushing. I think it makes no sense at all not to flush. I can't find a good reason. I don't think there's some increase yield 10% if you keep 2 EC all the way at the end. That's not a thing. The plant really can't use it.
Makes sense.
So yeah.
Perfect. Next, how about the big one? I guess you find what you look for, but why am I finding microseeds in my medical flower everywhere? And what are microseeds? Are they bad? Are they good?
Yeah.
What's the take on them?
Yeah. So this is another great one. I used to joke early with quality teams that if you look hard enough in any batch, you can find seeds. And early on in Canada, there wasn't a lot of clarity of what was a mature seed, what was immature seeds. And of course, I've done lots of breeding work now, so I really know a lot about hermaphrodism and the different stages of seed development. And very broadly, cannabis, most cultivars have this tendency to want to form male anthers, and they can come up at different stages of the life cycle. The most common thing that people find when they see microseeds is that cannabis is extremely vulnerable in those last couple of weeks on its death throes to any stress. And so you get rogue anthers that come up, and some fertilization has occurred somewhere, and you'll see those microseeds. In a facility operation where there's big problems, you'll see lots of those microseeds everywhere. And sometimes maybe there's not a lot of problems, but that genetic is just poor for doing that. And that's
prone for it.
That's part of the selection process. It really you shouldn't have this scenario anyway. Experience in the industry is also aligning with academic research now that is studying cannabis seed development, fertilization, genetics, where you can have microseeds, like the very, very, very first stages of fertilization without fertilization at all. The plant just thinks that something has happened and then it aborts this very early embryo. So that can actually just occur on its own.
Is there a level where you say this is tolerable, this isn't? Like rule of thumb for patients if they find this in their product?
And I think a hard rule for everyone is if there's lots of mature, full-blown, hard, in your face with the full camouflage pattern.
Husks.
Husk on it, then, that's a line in the sand that should be drawn everywhere. That said, if I find one mature seed and, if I have 7 grams or 10 grams or something, it doesn't matter to me.
No, you remove it.
Yeah, you just remove it. A lot of patients will accept that too, but I still think as a professional, you really shouldn't have that. And so a good organization will screen for cultivars that aren't doing that.
How about hang drying?
Yeah.
Hang drying.
I've seen every combination of things: hang dry, rack dry, buck, not buck, machine, wet trim, the whole suite. And companies actually kind of divided, equally. So it's not like there's one clear trend from my own experience and even other places that I've seen or worked with. And I think it boils down to the market you're operating in, what your facility constraints are. And now in this EU-GMP space, micro levels are the most important thing to reduce. And in post-harvest, thinking very clearly about control points, you want to not have as much undesirable plant material in that space as possible. So if you're hang drying, you're bringing in stems, you're bringing in leaves, you're bringing in a lot of biomass and micrological burden, or at least water that can proliferate those microbes into this very critical stage. And so I think that hang drying has that challenge that if you do a wet machine trim and then you put on racks, your actual micro load in this highly controlled space is inherently way less. And that's extremely important. And for some organizations and some markets, that actually might be like the hard line cutoff of to hang dry or not. Racks give you a lot more like volume that you can put in a spot, but there's a labor challenge. When you hang dry the flower, when it's done drying, you have to deal with it. You have to destock it. You have to trim it. You can't just leave a bunch of plants hanging. You can't put plants in barrels or something like that. In the way that if you machine trim and then put on racks, there's no like huge immediate need to have this large labor force do this trimming. You can put in a curing. And another thing that I should say that goes against the racks is that racks are often imprinting on flowers.
And flat spots.
Yeah, you get flat spots. And so, there's no hiding away from that. And so that does occur. You can get around that by having someone go in or people go in and turn the flowers on the racks. And so that's a labor sink that doesn't occur the same way in hang drying. Although if you are hang drying, you do need someone to go and turn things and look at things. But my philosophy with the teams are always, if people are doing one task, they're also a quality control technician too. So if you're turning flowers on a rack so that you're not getting the imprint, you're inspecting every flower many times, every single day. There is an afterlife in the drying phase. So plant life doesn't stop when you harvest. There's a lot of enzymatic reactions that are occurring to get the final biosynthetic forms of terpenes and cannabinoids. And those reactions are absolutely determined by temperature and humidity. And they're less driven by things like redistribution of starches or minerals that, maybe huge components of a hang dry might be. There is some effect going on there, but at a commercial scale, and in my experience seeing all combinations, the end result quality is more a function of the drying room temperature, humidity, how fast you got product through potential bottlenecks than it is one method versus another. I think that effect is so marginal.
I remember early days, everyone was kind of going for the racks here in Europe, which we had a lot of flat spots, very dry flower. Is it easier for it to dry out? Because I've heard, and not being a scientist myself nor a cultivator, but I've heard a lot that the hang drying, it being attached to the stem kind of gives a more homogeneous drying. Is there any sort of truth in that?
It's like a buffering ability from stem moisture.
That's what I heard.
That stem moisture component is really important more in the curing stage, because even without that large stem from hang drying, your flower, the inflorescence has a stem in there, and it's important that water is coming back and forth. Uneven drying in the drying room, even hang drying or racks, is a fundamental ecosystem airflow problem. Rather than you're right that a stem will be able to buffer water a little bit more, but this goes back to my fundamental ecosystem constraint thing. every single drying room that I've been in and measured airflow is variable. And without measuring that data, you don't know. And it is always the case that there's dead spots, and the distance between you and I might be twice the air movement. And there's a tendency, even with hang drying, to overfill a drying room. And so having a full drying room with already dead zones is a problem of whether a flower is too dry or too wet, is actually dealing with these dead zones.
That makes sense.
And that's a surprising thing that data reveals.
Yeah.
And it's kind of almost funny that, you know, these challenges are the same. It's the same everywhere, but it's an ecosystem.
And you've run all models yourself. You've tested them at scale in smaller testing environments, and it's just amazing. Yeah. So many companies here technically don't cure, but they say that our process technically cures it by, you know, putting it, harvesting, putting it into this bucket, moving it to this bucket, then putting it into packaging. That's kind of the burp as the product moves down the line. What's your philosophy on curing, and why is curing important?
Curing is really a gas exchange and biosynthetic phenomena where, as I mentioned, you're trying to get the final chemical reactions to occur. And those are driven by water coming internally to external tissues and then exchanging with the atmosphere. And why companies are saying that this process is occurring at many stages is because it is. And so an example, if you have flower that has finished drying, it's been bucked, but maybe it needs a final manicure or hand trim. Well, that's a actual curing gas exchange step. So you open a container, you put some, weigh everything and record the weights in your logbook, and you trim the flower, but the flower is releasing gas as you move it around, and then you put it back into another container, and then you get equalization, and then it goes into final packaging, and it's opened up again. Then the patient gets it, and they open it up. They take some and then they close it again. And so the key is to make sure that you're at the stage where you're initiating that curing step when you're done your final drying in your drying room. You want to be down to 12% moisture content, in internal flower moisture content, in order for those reactions to those final chemical reactions and gas exchange to occur. If it's too wet, if it's over that, you're running this microbial risk too that you really shouldn't be doing.
Got you. Love this. Absolutely love this. What about tissue culture? I mean, it's the most common practice across so many crops, from potatoes, cucumbers, tomatoes, whatever, where they use tissue culture as the commercial starting material. That doesn't seem to translate into cannabis. Why? And how is tissue culture used in cannabis?
Yeah, tissue culture is taking technically any cells and making a new plant out of cells. In practice, it's usually taking a small sliver of a stem, putting it in some mildew slurry of hormones and nutrients, and at different times you add different things to get roots, and then shoot, and you harden, and in theory what it's supposed to do is be a screening for contaminants, pests, pathogens, a virus. You get sterile tissue, and it's supposed to solve operational problems of if you can propagate 10,000 plants from one stem or a bunch of stems in little containers, then you don't need your mother room and all that. The reason why some crops you do it, because it works.
And because there's not a cheap alternative.
And there might not even be an alternative. So tissue culture in a lot of crops, especially in the tropics, is the only way to propagate. It's not seed producing. There's no stem. You do leaf culture or flower culture. And in some cultivars only exist by doing that. So it's not like a natural plant in a traditional sense. So for cannabis, this is it's interesting that cannabis can propagate from stem cutting naturally. And this is an evolved trait because cannabis is actually masquerading around as a tree. It's a woody plant that it has woody features, but it's an annual herbaceous plant. and it's not supposed to live indefinitely, yet you can grow mothers technically for years and years. There's a secondary woody growth that most herbaceous plants, cannabis is herbaceous, doesn't have. So cannabis is this herb that has this woody feature as a tree, and that's where when you take a cutting, organogenesis of new root cells will occur from those woody cell features in cannabis. So cannabis is seed producing. It is the seed producing plant, actually. Like, it is an extraordinary seed producer, as we've discussed. And it just happens to propagate from stem cuttings so well that in practice people do it. And when cannabis was very underground, this was the only way. You couldn't have fields with pollen flying around. You had a tent with a mother, and that was your only way to actually get new plants. So tissue culture in the industry is alive in patches. Stem cuttings are the workhorse for the reason that it works well.
I remember there was a lot of companies a couple of years ago that came from traditional agriculture, and they're huge tissue culture companies.
Yeah.
And then they promised the cannabis industry, you can get rid of your mother rooms and all your propagation, right?
Yeah.
Why does that commercially not work?
It's very cultivar specific, where some cultivars might really struggle with the stem elongation part. Others won't form
At the beginning, as they come out of tissue.
Yeah, exactly. So it's the actual getting a new plant, the science. So there's like these set of recipes from traditional crops that, people are saying, apply this set of recipes, it'll work. It's worked for everything else I've worked with. They apply that to cannabis, and it's not working at one step. There's a few key steps in this process, and a cultivar can make it all the way through, and this does happen. And so companies supplying tissue culture plantlets have found the cultivar that works. Maybe they've modified the recipe slightly. And I've had the good fortune of, there's a research group at Guelph that has, Max Jones has done the tissue culture stuff for a while, and he'll be often on LinkedIn as the first one to say it's very cultivar specific. We can't get this to work. This one does work. Tissue culture can always be a germplasm bank. You can always store tissue in media indefinitely. Whether you can get the tissue to form a new plant in the future when you need it to is a
question mark.
challenge. Yeah.
But it is, especially in North America, quite well adopted now. It's been adopted by the industry, but in what context? So how do they use it?
In North America, you've had 10 years now of teams applying this science and tweaking things for it to work. I would say it's less well adopted than you think. So in my experience, it's not the workhorse in a commercial facility.
Not even for mothers and propagate?
You can get initial plantlets. So I think the model that is most common is what you just say. Yeah, getting plantlets to do mother stock, or sending yours to get cleaned up mother stock, like a refresh program.
Yeah.
Although be careful with that, because sometimes you get variation.
So that was the point, to not get genetic variation.
No, yeah, exactly, to not get genetic drift. But there's there's just as much drift. People who take stem cuttings will say it does drift, and that is true. But I think the drift is potentially worse in some tissue culture cases. But I'm deviating that some companies, for some cultivars, have a protocol, have a method, and it works for that. And commercially, they'll have a small tissue culture lab, and one of their 4 backbone cultivars is from tissue culture. The other ones are from normal stem cuttings. And now a new dimension is stable seeds. Tissue culture is supposed to be a synthetic seed. You can encapsulate a live cell, and then that's a synthetic seed. Well, now, in the same way that people from tissue culture, conventional crops, seed breeders from conventional crops have come into cannabis and are making stable seed lines.
F1s.
It can be F1s, but you can also get stable inbred lines, like 4 or 5 generations that perform well agronomically, yield, potency, as well as stability, not always. So tissue culture and production from seed, I kind of put them in the same brackets as seeds solve a lot of the pathogen problems. They can get you new mother stock. It works for some lines, and some F1 hybrids are better than anything else, but not always.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not always easy to make a stable seed line. Probably some of the bigger organizations have all three going on.
Got you. One more would be...
These are not quick myth busters.
I love it. I love it though. I think you're giving the scientific content and the practical content. So smokability. How does an EU-GMP or manufacturer test smokability? I know obviously on paper this should all be vaped, but understanding your consumer is understanding that a lot of them are going to smoke it. The real question the myth or the kind of thing that was a white ash.
Yes.
How do you guys test for that? What are the kind of parameters where you optimize for smokability? And is white ash a component of that at all in your mind?
Yeah, very, very, very good question. It's interesting that a lot of analytical tests that you can perform, they don't necessarily need to be on a final C of A for like a batch release, let's say. But ash content is part of a normal analytical test regime. The ash thing is actually a combustion temperature problem. I think most fundamentally, and that temperature problem is driven by moisture content, and so that's why having really good control of the drying, the curing, and your final product. Testing both water activity, so like internal water pressure, water activity is a pressure problem, and inherent moisture content, which is like a percent mass of moisture in the flower. Where I'm going in this long explanation is that drier flower will burn hotter, and wetter flower will burn longer and cooler. And that's where your combustion chemistry is producing pure ash, which is complete combustion. White ash is complete combustion at high temperature. Dark ash is incomplete combustion at low temperature from moisture.
That makes a lot of sense to me.
And I should say it's even a flower anatomy question.
Oh, really?
So not every flower is the same structure. Some flowers have more pistils. Others have more of the sort of pseudo leaves called bracts. Others will have more trichomes, and different parts of that flower have different mineral content, and not only mineral but different carbon. It's carbon chemistry too. So their different building blocks have different carbon structures with different minerals embedded in there, and then consumed at different, combusted at different temperatures, creates all this variable chemistry.
I love your answers. I love your answers.
I think.
You think? We briefly spoke about team, Nigel, but I just wanted to talk about hiring philosophy. We're a recruitment agency, so it's always something that I find super interesting. Let's talk about cultivation. So for a cultivation team, what is it that you look for in a candidate and in a team?
Having a diverse team is important generally. And the people that are producing the product, they're closest to the cash. There's no shortcomings when you're hiring these people, and especially in the leadership positions in cultivation. I mean, frankly, these people are king.
Yeah.
They are king.
They're the most important person.
You need real talent in these roles. And maybe early on in the industry when we were starting, you could get away with, average, and people didn't even know what good was really back then. But now it's highly competitive, consolidated, and there's some real dogs in the game now. And so yeah.
Is there, I guess, what is more important to you? Somebody who's got experience in cannabis, or good attitude, or is a team player? Out of those things, is there something that you find more valuable than the other?
I love these people that are a 20-year grower, and you have a spot on the team for sure. I think putting your expectations aside for a little bit, in a professional EU-GMP environment, if you're an old school 20-year grower but you haven't worked in the legal industry, you're going to struggle at an executive senior leadership meeting.
Yeah.
you don't have that sort of skill and experience. So I absolutely love having you on the team. You're going to be part of a grow team for sure, because you know a lot of stuff. You are amazing. Like, these people are absolute legends.
Yeah.
Absolute legends, and they don't really necessarily need to grow in like a boardroom meeting way. They can be like a real pillar of a grow team, and they can be leaders of growers.
Yeah, and that's what I found. Some very talented growers, but they've never worked in a professional team, in a hierarchy. For years, they've been taught never to write anything down. Now you need to report everything.
Yeah.
A lot of these things are just tough for them to get used to.
One thing I think is maybe a challenge that folks aren't really thinking of that want to enter this space is you're not used to having your work questioned. And I don't mean like a personal attack on like your work ethic, but quality assurance has questions. They have questions of why isn't this thing filled out, or how did you use this? And, regulators here in Portugal, Infomed has lots of questions. And I think these people will run into walls if they're not expecting their work to be questioned in a totally different way. You have to be ready for that. And that's part of that openness mindset of a question's a question and not an attack. Yeah,
absolutely. Nigel, what's next for you guys? What's happening at Nova Soma? Yeah, what are you excited about?
Yeah, I'm really excited to be here and to be on this EU-GMP frontier because of the engine that it is. That it's this multinational engine of scale that is smartly done and is backed by compliance. And what's so exciting here with Nova Soma is we're operating in various markets. Those markets have different requirements. Maybe it's the packaging, maybe it's the ash content. And the teams on the other end of those countries are different too. And so it's taking this cannabis industry in a totally new dimension.
One thing I've been hearing, and maybe you're also like that, there's this really interesting level of respect that North Americans have for the UK. Actually, from a cannabis culture perspective and understanding the product. Is there a specific market? Obviously, everyone's looking at Germany, but are you more excited about seeing how product is being received in the UK or the Poland? Or is Germany just the obvious answer for you? Do you have a favorite?
Oh, this is amazing. So I can't separate myself from being a British citizen as well. And so I'm very excited about that. And I think Canadians are very similar to British people in general. So it's kind of like our cousins from across the pond are going through what we went through, but we're here for them and with them. And and so I really love that. And Germany's been a complete surprise, frankly. What I'm interested in is the next thing that does the surprising action. Is it Poland? Is it Switzerland? Is it the country we don't know about yet? That's like really, really exciting. And you have to have the engine in the team and the system ready to really take advantage when that occurs.
It's been an absolute pleasure having you on. You are our first proper guest on the podcast since we've taken it over. Is there one message you would like people to walk away with here?
Contact Lumino. but seriously, obviously, I want to thank you for bringing me to Portugal.
Of course. Thank you for being so.
Yeah, Lumino has been great. And I think one of the best things about you, and when I made the decision to finally come, you were on the phone with me. You were like, oh yeah, well, I just wanted to tell you how awesome Portugal was, but I didn't want to influence you one way or another. And you were right. So thank you.
I was really biting my tongue, or not to get overly excited, but I mean, this place, in Europe, I couldn't recommend one place more than Portugal. I absolutely love it.
It is sort of funny that now, or not funny, but interesting, a lot of those Canadian friends are now entering this marketplace. So Organigram, where I used to be the director of cultivation, bought Sanity.
Exactly.
And as I said, Northern Green was acquired by Curaleaf. And so old friends are now here. Hi again.
Amazing.
And
yeah, that's so cool. Yeah, I remember the first time I called you that it was crazy because you could hear the ice from the river like miles away.
That's
cracking.
Right. That's right.
Like those, I remember that.
Oh, wow.
That I was like, wow, I didn't realize it was so loud.
That's amazing. That's very cool.
Looked beautiful where you were actually at the time. And I guess, is there for any other North American trying to make that move, is there any tip that you would have for somebody to move over? any concerns that you can remove for somebody?
Make sure you have a network established already. So the concern of leaving North America to come to Europe is that you're isolated. First and foremost, it's not isolating here because basically this is a multicultural community. But if you have networks, friends of friends, family, or colleagues in the industry, even if you don't know someone, start reaching out. And even some foundation is nice when you land.
So if you're looking to come here from North America, trying to make friends, is everyone competing with each other, not trying to share information? Or does it feel collaborative? Does it feel like you can have colleagues that work for competitors, if you know what I mean? Or peers would be the right word, not colleagues.
This can come in and outside of work, but in a workplace, people from North America that are here unite, and you can unite even in competitiveness together. So right now there's 4 Canadians that work at SOMAÍ, for example, and you've seen some of us together. Canadians are competitive, but maybe not as competitive as Americans. And we're very united. All of us are extremely different. And so that's not the energy, but I find the Portuguese culture here has been very accepting, and there's not inherent us versus them going on, and that's amazing.
It's not like the foreigners and us.
Yeah, it's not like that at all. And
I felt that.
Yeah, and exactly, and even within Europe, so a Dutch culture is different than a Portuguese one, is different than German. So yeah, you see the same thing, right?
100%. Yeah, I felt very welcome coming here.
For sure. And I think, both of us have a open attitude and mindset, and that is probably why we're so well received. So anyone coming here, that's the kind of mindset that you want to have, and that openness allows someone to be open with you. And
for sure.
For better or for worse, and all your failures, all of your struggling to pronounce things, all the times being lost and not understanding the system.
Yeah, absolutely.
But seriously, obviously, everyone, watching, listening can feel what you're about and your company. But I think this conversation is that trust your journey. And for anyone already in the spaces, think of this as the ecosystem that we've been discussing. It's a fully integrated end-to-end patient in a facility, in a podcast studio. It's an ecosystem. So go for it. Be a person in the ecosystem.
I love that. Nigel, thank you so much for
Thank you, Nikita.
Awesome. Yeah.
The Cannabis Conversation, powered by Lumino. As always, thank you for joining us, and do subscribe or follow this podcast to be the first to catch future episodes.